All right, we are live again for the third week in a row. Holy crap! As you can see, there's something weird going on with the camera. I don't know what it is, and I just found out like about 2 minutes ago.
It's not a technical difficulty involved. It's not the ballistic missionaries.
Yeah. Oh, you know it.
Today we're being brought to you with a 1970s porno movie.
Or possibly your dreams.
Yes. Or both.
Okay. We don't want to judge you.
Yeah, we don't mind if you're some sort of weird demented freak that has some sort of weird obsession with us.
You found the right place.
But if you are, if you can support us on our various Patreons and other financial means, that would be great. A little give and take from us.
Yeah. We're all demented freaks here. There's no judgment. Anyway, welcome to the Ballistic Missionaries. I'm Z. This is Dan. Yes. That was only slightly racist.
Just a little bit.
I'm hoping that the issue with our booming, muffled bass voice will be fixed now, too, because I had this thing, the preamp, all the settings all weird, so I don't know.
Connected to some sort of guitar foot pedal. That was it.
Yeah. Actually, I could connect a foot pedal to this. I could connect a bunch of stuff to this. Yay, Behringer. Anyway, so today we are talking about, well, actually, before we get started on our topic du jour, I don't know what week is in French. What's week in French?
I don't know.
Our topic du week. De semana. There you go. I don't know in French.
It's Frenchlish. You heard Spanglish. This is Frenchlish.
Yeah. We have our, and I should have made a sign for it. I was going to make a sign for it today, and I decided to sit around and play Minecraft instead this afternoon. So, no regrets.
No regrets.
Yeah. But it's our, what stupid shit has the Trump administration done this week? Minute.
Yeah.
Or two.
Yeah, it's going to be more than 2 minutes.
It's going to be, yeah. We'll try to keep it under 10 minutes.
The minute thing is basically just for window dressing.
Yes. Okay, well, first thing on the list, the Department of Education is being dismantled quickly. And that's pretty screwed up because we live in Altoona, Pennsylvania. We're in central Pennsylvania, technically, in Blair County. Most people here live below the poverty line, or at the poverty line, or a tiny bit above the poverty line, and yet we consistently vote against our own interests in this town.
I dream of one day living at the poverty line.
But, so in classic tradition of people in Blair County,
there's a great camera.
Oh boy, that would be nice. Yeah. I have a camera next door. It's supposed to be able to do live functions, connect to Wi-Fi. I don't know I haven't been able to figure out how to do that yet, so we'll see. Anyway, Trump's dismantling the Department of Education. So at my job at the library, on Tuesdays, I'm usually down in the youth room, and we have a very nice teacher who does after-school tutoring to try to make ends meet because teachers are criminally underpaid in our country. And we got to talking a few weeks back, and apparently 1 in 5 children in the Altoona area school district, 20%, sorry, I can do math, is in some kind of special education class. Now, not necessarily an intellectually disabled child or an autistic child, but 20% of the children in the Altoona area high school have learning disabilities that they need assistance for. That comes directly out of the Department of Education. In fact, that is one of the first things to go anytime there are cuts in the Department of Education, which means that the 20% of kids that are in the local school district are going to be without appropriate accommodations. And Dan and I both understand how damaging it is to have to go through school needing accommodations and not being able to access them.
Yeah, I guess I would classify myself as an undiagnosed autistic.
I think you have ADHD.
Yeah, possibly.
You definitely have autism.
That being said, when I grew up in the 1980s, there was no subtle distinctions between different levels of autism, ADHD, ADD, any of the, I guess, well-known, well-documented neurodivergencies and various learning disabilities. You were categorized into one of three spaces, quote unquote, the normal folk. Number two, you were garden variety, mentally retarded.
Well, intellectually disabled. No?
Yes.
They wouldn't have said it back then.
No, because that term didn't exist. Or batshit crazy. And if you
also a technical term.
Yeah. But for purposes of which if you felt that you were in one of those two categories, you didn't say it to anybody, and there was definitely no support system for anybody that today would be diagnosed as, again, ADD, ADHD, autism, any of those particular either developmental disabilities, educational disabilities, so on and so forth.
Yeah. And when I was in school in the 90s, it sounds like there's like 10 years difference between. There's only
really
6 years.
This will be getting into our topic here. It's a good segue.
But when I was in school in the 90s, there were special education programs. I went to a bizarre small school that was made up of several different, very small communities and all of the farmland in between those communities. So despite the fact that we were small and we were poor, we did have a special education program that I was not able to get into because my father is a crazy person who, despite the fact that my mom had me tested for autism, I think, when I was a child, my father would not admit that there was anything wrong with me. So I didn't know that there was anything wrong with me. I thought I was just dumb and terrible until I was in like my 30s and I realized, oh, hey, I'm autistic. So it wasn't an option. And my father, even if he had accepted the fact that I am autistic, would never have let it be an option because it would have looked bad for him. So, yeah.
But back to point.
Back to point. The Department of Education, basically, okay, so in the reign of Jimmy Carter, during the administration of Jimmy Carter, makes it sound like he's like a king or something.
Jimmy.
Yeah. But during the Carter administration, the Department of Education was officially founded.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that a bunch of morons on Twitter that I argued with last year don't seem to realize. The Department of Education was ensconced in a larger department. It existed. It just did not exist as itself, and all funding was allocated between it and several other smaller departments within this larger department. I can't remember what it was, though, at the moment. But so Carter signed the department into be its own specific department in the government. Apparently, Republicans have been really pissed off about this ever since. And now that they have all the power in the country, they are destroying it. So what that means is all of the funding that leveled the playing field for poorer schools and small schools to compete with larger schools with the children of influential parents who can acquire their own funding is going to be non-existent anymore. And unless you have plans to send your child to a charter school, which are questionable, and we'll probably get into that on the series at some point, you're going to be shit out of luck because your kid ain't going to learn shit.
Yes, that was a perfect English grammatically correct statement made right there that we learned in the fine public schools in the area. Let's start off here. We don't think there are not problems with the Department of Education and B and public schools and the educational system in this country. There certainly are.
I didn't know that the Korean War existed because my high school never taught us about the Korean War. And I got to college. This is a true story. I'm not joking. I got to college and I was in American history class and they started talking about the Korean War. And I was like, what's that? Did that happen? Huh? Yeah. So,
there was a war in Korea?
when was that? 50 years ago. What?
That was what MASH was about.
That would have helped because I never really watched MASH. I thought that was about the Vietnam War because I never watched it. Anyway, so yes, there are problems. We are living embodiment of, schools that had a lot of problems.
Why is there no rock music? They're not listening to the Beatles, like, because the Beatles were in elementary school in Korea. Again, neither one of us are saying there are not problems with the educational system in this country, with the Department of Education, and there could not have been some reforms within the Department of Education.
I should say there were problems before the, Republicans have been, working on destroying funding to it the past couple of decades. There were problems before that when everything was operating at peak efficiency. There have always been issues, but...
That being said, dismantling the Department of Education, basically, their statement is as such that they're going to turn things back over to the states, which is
always a mess.
Which means funding for schools are going to come from one of two places: one, state and county funding in general, and two, property taxes, which every school around, from here to California gets the bulk of its money from. And if you leave it solely within the scope of a school is going to get its money primarily from property taxes, when you get to poor areas like, say, counties in West Virginia, counties in Mississippi, places like, again, Michigan, Detroit, poor urban areas, poor rural areas, what you're going to be left with is places that don't have the means to support themselves. And basically, when you go to this point, to the Republican side, GOP conservative side, say, well, we'll just give them vouchers and tax breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Vouchers only can account, like, if you're giving like a flat amount to everybody, that make them only afford whatever it is, that plus whatever that means they have on their own. If you're somebody that's of middle class or upper class, either you don't need it at all, or basically they could use it in subsidizing and use their own funds in order to go to a good school, to a good charter school, to some other. Everybody else is world with a gutted
shit out of luck,
a gutted public school system to go to, and hopefully for the best, and hopefully maybe they have a natural interest in learning. Otherwise, you're screwed.
And even if you do, it's hard to learn when you have, no materials to learn with. I introduced Dan to Abbott Elementary over the weekend, and like what he's saying, I went to a poor rural school. He went to a poor inner city school. Times haven't changed for too many of them, I've
had the privilege of accessing both. I've done both poor urban schools in elementary and parts of the middle. High school was somewhat, it was, I'll say my high school, when my senior year, was an 800-person school capacity, and there were 1,600 students at the school.
Yeah, yet another issue that can be fixed with funding.
We were basically all sitting outside of trailers. I'm sure it's a thing today in certain schools, but like in ours, it was indicative of
lack of proper ventilation, lack of proper air conditioning. They're not going to be able to afford janitorial staff anymore.
The springs and early summers were super hot. The winters were super cold. And that right there affects, basic learning capacity.
And you know what else is fun? Going to a very, very 100-year-old school that's falling apart and is full of lead pipes and asbestos.
Yeah.
That was the first 4 years of my life. That was fun. That's why I don't think so good.
Yeah. Again, I'm not saying, and Sue is not saying, the money cannot be allocated in better ways. We cannot have ways to improve the educational system. That there are not problems in the American education, which are legion. But we're saying the way to not go about this is to create a class tier system, and it is.
Classism has solved nothing in this country, and it never will.
Doing what they're doing is is economic warfare and class warfare.
Very much so. Yeah. So, we have that to look forward to. Our education is already woefully underfunded, and now it's going to be nothing.
Yeah. So I guess we got to.
So anyway, we got to move on. We're taking too long on this because we get annoyed. All right. So yesterday, our president struggled with Venezuela trying to dump off a bunch of immigrants that got rounded up by ICE, which is a criminal organization. I will remind you. Venezuela finally agreed to take the plane load of people after a couple of weeks of refusing not to take them. So now we have a bunch of migrants got loaded up, put on a plane to Venezuela. Are they from Venezuela? Who the fuck knows? I have not found any information on this. I don't think anybody in the government knows or cares. The people who are doing this clearly don't care because they don't see them as fully human. So that's going to continue, and eventually they're going to start doing it with actual citizens. So be ready for that because, fascism 101. All right. Mahmoud Khalil. Do you know have you heard about him?
Yes, I have sort of the general stories about him, listening to the news and reading up on it a little bit. So
well, if those of you who don't know at home, Mahmoud Khalil is a student here on a visa. He was arrested for being involved, possibly leading a pro-Palestine rally, and is now being threatened with immigration. But he's been held. Was it Guantanamo? Was he being held at Guantanamo?
I can't say it was Guantanamo.
I can't remember where specifically, but he's being held basically indefinitely.
Yeah.
And I have understood today that they're trying to add on a bunch of outdated anti-Semitism laws, but no sign of him being tried, released, anything. Basically, they're using him as an example to try for terrorism crimes, for doing something that is guaranteed in the founding documents of this country.
It's a number of things. One, it's a power play by the conservatives in the Trump administration in order to gain, I would say, their platform of pro-Israel, pro-Zionism. There's a difference in my head. You can be critical of the Israeli government. You
should be critical of the Israeli government. You should look up UN documents of the kind of war crimes that they have been visiting upon the heads of the Palestinian people for decades. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You can and should be critical of Netanyahu.
That dude is the worst.
He certainly deserves it.
Yes. He
and that being said, this guy, as far as I know, is doing just that. He's being critical of Israel, and as far as I can tell, there's no. It's meant for what he's.
I mean, you have to remember the Palestinian, many of these protests were basically sit-ins at college campuses that devolved into pro-Israeli students coming out and fighting with them. It involved the police being called, what's it called, smoke bombs?
Yeah,
smoke bombing them, when literally all they were doing was just being peaceful, intense, with signs painted on them on college campuses because that's where they lived.
And he's gone down on record, and basically the mission of his local chapter is saying that they are themselves are not anti-Semitic. They have no place for anti-Semitism in their group. Their goal is to criticize the Israeli government and to criticize Netanyahu, to criticize what's going on in Gaza. That's it. Which all of it deserves to be criticized. Again, as we both iterated earlier, that there's a difference between being anti-Semitic and being
anti-Zionist, yeah. And it's not even because you have to remember, I'm ethnically Jewish. I like Jewish people more than I like Christians, if you want to be honest about it. And Dan's, well, not technically ethnically Jewish. He thought he was ethnically Jewish because his adopted grandfather is ethnically Jewish. But
I don't necessarily claim it the way that I used to due to my not knowing, again, I guess we'll get this into another episode. That my lineage and parentage is up for question, and at this point, I just kind of come to a point in my life where I just don't. For me, like where I come from doesn't necessarily reflect by the identity of who I am now. But back to the point.
But anyway, like there's no malice against Jewish people here. In fact, a lot of Jewish people have also been out protesting for the past 2 years. Been 2 years? Year and a half?
Yeah.
Ever since
longer than that,
about a year and a half or so. A lot of Jewish people have been out protesting also. What's happening is not okay, and if you think it's okay, then you're not looking close enough. And what our government is attempting to do is basically it's setting an example with this guy that says that they're trying to set a precedent to say that anybody going against the government is committing a crime. That's what fascists do. It's if you're out there and you're like, oh, that's not fascism. Like, no, honey, it's definitely fascism. They're using the playbook, okay?
It's attack.
Pretty it's like fascism 101. They're not even at the advanced level yet.
It's bare minimum an attack on every facet of the First Amendment. It's
very much so.
It's an attack on freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom to peaceably assemble. Beyond that, to hold contradictory viewpoints from what the party in charge holds, to criticize your government, to criticize other governments. Basically, it's a stepping stone to giving Trump in particular, but those who are in power an air of infallibility.
Yes. If you don't know what we're talking about, look at North Korea.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like it is now. No. Because we're here on a podcast. We're expressing our opinions.
Yeah, but that's how it starts. It starts with one domino of a guy forming a legal precedent for this guy to, have legal action taken against him because he used his right to free expression. That's the first domino. And this stuff comes up. It's the frog in the boiling water analogy. It doesn't seem like it now, but eventually it will, and it will get to the point where you can't turn the water off. You're just getting boiled. There's no one who can turn the water off. So denying this young man his civil liberties, regardless of the fact whether he is he is here legally as a student on a student visa. He is being held illegally for doing something that is guaranteed in the First Amendment. And that's pretty fucked up. Literally, yet another example of the Trump administration circumventing established law in order to basically create their own precedents in order to accomplish, what they want. So,
any other fun stuff?
Yes, one more. A news from Greenland. Greenland is pissed at us because...
you mean the 52nd state?
Oh, yes. We are legally obligated to refer to it as the 52nd state. Anyway, so apparently there was Trump land.
Santa's workshop. I'm not racist towards the people of Greenland, and I, in fact, love all 56,000 of you.
Is that how many there are?
I think something around
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I know that. I don't know. I keep wanting to say Reykjavik, but that is Iceland. And there's a difference between Greenland and Iceland.
Yeah, Iceland
Greenland has ice. Iceland has green.
It was the world's first tourist trap.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vikings. Anyway, so apparently Trump or his administration, I think it was Trump himself, went for a state visit to Greenland. He was a dick to them. They a state visit. They said that he was being very cold and not listening to them because, Trump's out here all, well, this is going to be, or I'm not going to do a Trump. I almost tried to do a Trump imitation, but I can't do it.
I love Greenland. I love Santa's
Greenland
workshop.
will be the 52nd state. It will be fabulous.
Yes.
And then China will be the 53rd state. It'll be fabulous. It'll be fantastic.
There's going to be so many Trump ski resorts in Greenland. You're going to love it. Everyone will go to Greenland for their winter vacations.
But anyway,
so many polar bears and penguins. Polar bears eat penguins. I saw Chili Willy. It was a documentary. I saw all the episodes, and
we'll lock up all the polar bears. We'll keep them from bringing fentanyl into our borders.
We'll finally teach Goonie Bird how to fly and how to land and take off.
But
it'll be glorious. And then Goonie Bird will join Space Force. Anybody that's anybody under the age of 50, Goonie Bird was a minor character in Chili Willy.
Ironically, he is not under 50.
Yeah,
but anyway, so Greenland is not happy about their state visit. So that's I
spoke with President Chili Willy.
I don't understand the Greenland thing. Where did Greenland come from? Did he just learn that Greenland was on a map and now he's like, oh yeah, we can take that? Or is this going to be like his Grenada?
The Greenland thing is not invented by Trump. The Greenland thing goes all the way back to at least like World War II. And that's trying, and that goes further back than that. I want to say it goes to maybe even the 19th century. It might have been another thing that Seward was trying to get his hands on. Don't quote me, look it up.
Yeah.
But definitely World War II and the Cold War, there were small efforts to get Greenland for us to have some sort of a base there for greater access to Europe and Russia.
So they don't want to accommodate our needs. So now we're just like, well, we're going to take them over. Is that where he's coming from?
Trump be trumping is the easy way to the oversimplifiers.
Yeah, that's
the more elaborate is. He's just kind of trying to, on one paper, to have the veneer of reasonability. Like we're going to offer him a bunch of stuff, but on the other side, he's still trying to give a third grader's version of toughness. Like, yeah, we're going to offer him everything, the best package in the world. They're like, we're going to take him over there. They're going to love our invasion. It's going to be the greatest,
the biggest invasion, the best invasion. I hear there's going to be troops coming from our newest state, Canada, and they're going to float over in their Viking boats.
Yes. We're going to run. All they have is Viking ships, but we have planes. They've never seen planes before.
So yeah, that's the stupid shit that's happening.
Our boats have motors. Theirs don't.
They need all the men to sail the boats, and they'll never be able to get to us in time.
We'll introduce them to vegetables. I've never personally eaten one, but once they do that, they eat their broccoli. It's going to be perfect with the fish. All the fish that they eat, yummy, yummy. I myself like the filet of fish sandwich at McDonald's. I feed it to everybody that comes to the White House.
Yeah. Oh, God. So anyway.
There was a point to this, but we just...
the point is Trump is an idiot, and the Trump administration is full of morons. Well, yeah. But, so yeah, that's the what stupid shit did Trump do this week minute. And it took a half an hour.
I do all the best stupid stuff. all the lame, stupid stuff. I do the best, please.
If we're going to be doing Trump impressions, I want to get like a pair of doll hands and wear sleeves so that we can be like Kristen Wiig's character in the singing sisters from the Finger Lakes. Do you guys know on the SNL sketches?
Yes.
So
Lawrence Welk, recurring.
Coming soon, Trump with tiny hands.
Hold me close, you tiny dancer.
So anyway, all right. So the topic for this week is Generations, not the movie Generations, which was not really as bad as...
No, it was an alright start.
I mean,
we are definitely not talking for like another hour about Star Trek Generations, but there are clearly better Star Trek movies out there.
Yeah, we could talk for an hour about Star Trek, how Star Trek 3 isn't that bad of a movie. Search for Spock is pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Well, that Generations, the actual Generations of this country, we've spent a half an hour bullshitting about the Orange Man. Although Orange Man may pop up at some point during this conversation. So.
Probably. But, okay, so Dan is a younger Gen X member. Yeah. I am an elder millennial. There's about 6 years difference between us. And so sometimes, we being...
differences are insurmountable.
Yeah.
But we stay together anyway.
What voice is that?
I don't know. Do you like it? Let us know in the comments, one person.
You sound like you should be doing Pepperidge Farm commercials. Mm-hmm. Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Pepperidge Farm remembers, even though I don't.
So anyway, it's Reagan. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we are online terminally, and we've had discussions about, we see a lot of memes about, if you were born between this date and this date, you had the best childhood because blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of funny because we are, being that we are of two different generations, we're actually very similar in things that we've, grown up around. Yeah. And, like watched, activities we've done, things we've experienced, and
I think there's a 70 to 85% overlap between, either we understand it or either we've been through it ourselves or we understand it to a certain degree. Yeah. Most of the stuff that I'll say in about 80 to 90% of any time a generational thing comes up between Sue and I, and it's mostly me, and it's mostly because I'm 6 years older, and I watched some show, and it also, Sue came from a more sheltered childhood than I did.
My father's a crazy person.
I was more exposed to those things from the, and again, me growing up, like I said, I considered myself junior Gen X. Like, I was born in 76. Most, quote unquote, aficionados cut off somewhere between 78 and 80.
I've heard 78 to 80.
Is the cutoff for Gen X. And I consider myself Gen X, but I always, growing up, considered myself late to the party, because by the time I became, 13, 14, 15, 16, and discovered things like, I guess music is my biggest touchstone, one of my biggest touchstones to Gen X culture. Like I like some of the 80s, I guess, alt music, like your Replacements, your REM, stuff like that. But my big one was, like most people of my age, was Nirvana, because I was around 15, 16 years old when Nevermind dropped. And the good thing I'll say about that is it made me listening to it made me into a musicologist, because before that, I never heard anything like that. And it made me want to go, okay, Nirvana came from things like the Pixies and Sonic Youth, and they came from stuff like the Velvet Underground and the punk movement and post-punk. And, but back to point, like I said, when Sue and I go have any kind of, like, I don't understand what that is, it's usually from me quoting something that Sue never grew up with. It's never from the other end where it's almost never from anything where my generational irrelevance came into play. Yeah. And although I'm certainly out of touch with whatever's going on with the zeitgeist of the time.
He has no Riz.
Yeah, neither do you.
No, I know. I just saying.
That being said,
I know what Riz is, yo.
I figured out what it was. Is it like razzmatazz?
But I was born in 1982, so I am what's considered an elder millennial. I am
No, you're older millennial.
Yes, apparently we're all elderly.
Yeah.
Apparently nobody seems to realize that it's not just a personality trait. We're all just old now. So being a millennial to me was, I don't know. I don't feel like I have any kind of cultural generational. I think nothing positive. The only like generational identity I have is being basically spending my entire life being shat on by the boomers. Like, oh, we're the participation trophy generation. It's like, you bitches were the ones giving us the participation trophies.
Exactly. They're
like we, so it's like, it's mostly just been torture from the boomers who refuse to die. Just giving us a hard time our whole life. And that's pretty much our identity as a generation. We're just tired. We're all tired and old. And we've been tired and old since we were in our 20s. I was, 19 when 9/11 happened. I had just started driving. It was a lot. Yeah. Being 19, being in college, having like the world's terror attack and on U.S. soil happening right when I'm about to go out and experience the world. And it was that's been that, and being like in the late 90s and early 2000s, just sort of putting a band-aid over that that sort of weight and depression by wearing ridiculous clothing and listening to ridiculous pop music.
Jinkos.
Hey, don't make fun of the Jinkos. Those things are comfortable.
And you can live in them.
Yeah, you can live in them. Yes. If you ever were homeless, you could make a tent out of the pants. Yeah. They came with instructions in the back pocket, but I don't think anybody ever noticed. Because you couldn't
give instructions?
Yes. But all pants come with instructions. How do you think people know how to wash them?
Just throw them in the washer. I just got husky pants from when I was a kid, and we were thankful. We're just like, all right.
To be fair, I had to wear a bunch of 70s corduroy when I was a kid because I have a ton of cousins. So we just passed all the clothing down at whatever, So I wore a lot of bad 70s corduroy when I was a kid. I have never been able to wear corduroy since because I hate it. It's horrible.
Cold wash detergent. Clean clothes. It's great.
Literally all clothes have instructions on them, Dan.
I know there's a little tag.
Yes, that's the instructions.
Okay. I thought you got like a whole booklet or something. That's the way you're making it sound.
I was being facetious.
Okay.
These are the jokes. Come on, that's a tough road. Anyway, so that's the generational identity that I have. Everything was kind of saccharine and shallow, a little vacuous, I guess. And everything smelled like bad berry perfume.
And Axe body spray.
Axe body spray, yes.
I would like to take a moment saying this as a member of Gen X that loves the music, loves the film and the culture, and a lot of the things that came out of it. I'd like to take the moment to tell Gen X to go fuck themselves. I say this this is not me just randomly shitting on you. I like my problem with Gen X kind of goes with we're kind of like in this sort of nostalgia tunnel for the last 20, 30 years. As Sue pointed out earlier, it's like, we're the generation that was neglected by our parents. We're the generation that had no guardrails,
you were neglected. We were overly.
Yeah, you had the helicopter project.
Nice.
We were the latchkey kids, and we're tough. We don't care. It's like, you do care. Stop lying. Yeah. You absolutely, positively do care. Because you're just putting on a veneer of toughness.
Yes.
And coolness through apathy. You know what? Mm-hmm. Apathy fucking sucks.
It does.
It does nothing to help anybody. It just nope. It's like nothing bothers me. It's like nothing bothers me, but it doesn't. Nothing bothering you doesn't make anything go away or doesn't solve problems. And on top of that, I would also go with adventure that you got. All of us now that we're entering, like our youngest Gen Xer is in his mid to late 40s. I'm
No, youngest Gen Xers are about 45.
with 45, mid to late 40s.
Yeah.
With your oldest ones getting ready to draw their first Social Security check in a couple of years. We instead of we're the eldest child of this, I would say, of the boomers.
Yeah.
And instead of getting
the eldest child of the boomer abuse.
Yeah. But instead of getting together with our millennial, and I would say even what's the current guys out today?
Gen Zs.
Yeah, your Gen Zs. Which they're kind of a share of like the youngest of the boomers, but they're also kind of our kids now. Instead of getting together with them, the way it feels to me, and this and other people may or may not disagree with me, we kind of get together. We're trying to do. There's this show I've watched a couple of episodes of Succession, and we're kind of being that oldest guy. And I hate this show. I dropped it after 2 episodes, but I've seen enough of like think pieces and stuff like that. Like the oldest kid, we're kind of the oldest kid in Succession. We're desperately trying to get our ailing boomer parents to give us a last deathbed nod of approval before they shuffle off the model car. So look, I was great. I'm not the disappointment you think we are. I'm saying it's not from a personal thing, but from a collective effort. So I think we kind of joined in on our boomer parents' political stances.
It's like 50 years of pretending that you don't give a shit, and then all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, love me, daddy, love me, daddy."
Yeah. But still with this veneer, like, yeah, we're super tough, love me, daddy. Like, give me a hug. Come on, like, look what I did. That'll make you happy. Like, we don't need to be this. Like,
should I sell out my entire country and my generation and all the generations that come after me, just like you did
for
parental approval?
Yeah. It's like, no, don't. Like, make an effort to, and I guess maybe some of you are going in the direction you go now because you do have kids and grandkids, but this is certainly not going to make their world any better.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I say this with tough love. Fuck Gen X and fuck what they've become. And I'm sure there are boomers out there that are totally disappointed what happened with their generation, that they were
a small contingent of them.
Yeah,
even though most of them are selfish and self-righteous and, took what they wanted and complained the whole time that they didn't get enough and then screwed over the rest of us. Sorry. I don't.
And I'll say this too. All in all, speaking as somebody that appreciates the things that happened during Gen X's rise to adulthood, generational tribalism in and of itself is a bullshit concept.
It is. Because there's a lot of that on Facebook, and I see like people from like the boomers, like younger boomers, posting things like, we're the last generation that understood respect, and it's like, bitch, what are you talking about? And it's always like the old white guys that are sharing this. Like, yeah, okay, people showed you respect because people of other races and genders showed you respect because you could legally murder them in horrible ways.
That's I guess the meme classifications that pop up the most are the ones that
we were the last generation that did blank blank blank, and it's
bullshit. That is like it glorifies people like Fred Sanford and Archie Bunker as paradigms of virtue, and to me it's like those guys were not the heroes of their story. They were the protagonists of their story.
Connor was like a hugely liberal.
He was a New Deal Democrat.
Yeah, he was a lifelong Democrat.
And And basically,
If you think that what's his name? What the hell was his name?
Carol Connor.
No, the
Norman
Archie Bunker. If you think that Archie Bunker is like your hero, then your life is a lie, because Norman Lear, who is basically the guy who was the showrunner and the creator, wrote Archie Bunker as what do you call it? As a satire, almost.
Yeah, sort of a satire.
Yeah, your life is a lie, and you should feel bad.
As the aging, I guess, an aging greatest generation of that time, or basically middle aged.
But it kind of felt like it was, yes, he was technically like the greatest generation, but he spoke to boomers who didn't realize it was social satire.
Yeah.
Who wanted to make their lives
there are people that want, even in the 70s, wanted Archie Bunker to run for as a presidential candidate. And again,
Lord.
To where Norman Lear basically sat down there. I was like, man, I literally did create a lovable bigot. I was like, why did I give a multidimensional facet to this character? Because now people, at the very least, empathize. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. Empathy can be a great thing, and there's a huge anti-empathy movement in this country right now.
Empathy is one of the greatest human abilities that we have.
But that being said, back to point, Archie Bunker, Fred Sanford, none of these guys were the heroes of the story. They were the protagonists of their story, but they were definitely in many ways, I hesitate to use the term cautionary tale, but definitely to somebody to not be seen as somebody to emulate in terms of behavior.
Yeah.
It was a comedic show, and these guys were profoundly flawed human beings being put on display for both comedic and satirical purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like people that put that out today, like, he was telling it like it is. Like, no, he was an idiot.
Yeah,
he was an idiot to point out how
flawed these people are.
How flawed this logic was. How flawed this personal and political and social viewpoints were.
Yet another reason why we need the Department of Education, because people do not understand how to think critically, especially about art in this country.
But back to point, my generation tends to look at the people like that. Tend to look at like, oh, how we didn't have this and this and this, and it made us tough. And it's like, no, it really, sure, maybe like. The adage of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger has its root in truth, but at the same time, you should use it as a reason to pull up the ladder from others, pull up the ladder for others to use. It shouldn't be like, well, I did it tough, and you should like and there's another
it's like those things that you see, like if somebody says, I had this happen to me when I was young and I'm fine, so I think this terrible thing should happen to someone else. Clearly, you're not fine.
No.
You're way far away from fine. You should not be wishing terrible things on other people.
It's minimalizing the trauma of others.
It is, yeah.
And again, that's become a hallmark of again, my generation's expression.
Okay, but see, as a millennial, to get to the second half of this, Gen Xers don't really rate. Growing up, we're like, I don't give a fuck about the Gen Xers.
Yeah,
they don't want to be a part of anything. They want to pretend like they don't exist, and the rest of us don't exist either. So fucking let them. Who the hell cares? It's pretty much how I always took it. And I say this having, a sister and a brother who are 7 and 8 years older than me, respectively, or 8 and 7 years.
The Gen X.
Yeah, they were very much Gen Xers. And it's like, fuck them. Who the hell cares? They don't want to be part of the world, and who cares, And up until, every subsequent generation has gotten better than ours. We were better than the boomers because, we started working at an early age. We became more politically active at an early age, because we had this crushing weight on us from an early age that was like the expectations of boomers who hated us, and all of this shit that was crashing down around us from an early age, either early, adulthood or late teens, depending on how old you were. And it was very much like, how do I want to put this? Like, I wouldn't say we were necessarily apathetic. We were just tired. We felt like the whole weight of everything was on our shoulders because the Gen Xers didn't care enough to help. They were just like checked out, it felt like. And it was like all of this weight came barreling down onto us. And, being, I'm going to be turning 43 here in a few months. This is sort of, a lot of millennials we're in like mid 30s to mid 40s now, and it's going to be an interesting to see in the next 5 or 10 years where we go. I know a lot of us we like the younger generation. Some of us don't. I personally think that Gen Z kids are, gonna save the world where we thought we were going to, and we can't.
If they could just get past their anime fetish and their fuck pillows everywhere.
But yeah, so I think in a lot of ways, millennials kind of took the brunt of all the other generations and wanted to stop the cycle of generational trauma, as it were, so that the Gen Zers could just do what the fuck they wanted to do and save the world, which I have no doubt they're going to do because these kids are awesome. And we're a generation that took on so much responsibility in the world. We were, up until the Gen Zers, we were by far, the earliest to get jobs, go out on our own, what was I going to say? Become politically motivated in early ages. But it wasn't from any kind of a positive standpoint. Like, you have people like David Hogg and Maxwell Frost who are Gen Zers who are bringing just like a passion and an energy. And we're just like, we just need to stop things from sucking. We're so tired, but we have to stop things from sucking. Like that was our generational energy. So it's like, it's going to be interesting to see if we fall into the same lane as the Gen Xers, where we're like pushing this sort of boomer philosophy.
I think to a certain degree you kind of are. Like there is a contingency of millennial politicians. The biggest example of that would be our vice president.
Yes, I'm wearing my anti-Appalachian elegy shirt. So yeah, I mean, he is a millennial. You have people like Ben Shapiro. AOC is a millennial. Lauren Boebert, unfortunately. Matt Gaetz. Wait, is Matt Gaetz a millennial or is he a Gen Xer? I think he might be
not sure on that one.
But it's more like, we don't
have, either way, but
we don't have that kind of, I think our identity is less in one political movement or another and more in just whatever, we'll do it ourselves. Just leave me alone. Yeah. I think that's kind of where we're at. So it's like, yes, we do have conservative millennials. Yes, we do have leftist millennials. We have everybody in between, but we kind of got there on our own. We didn't get there by following someone else. We're just like, this is how I think things should be. So I'm going to go do this, I don't. So I don't know. Are we going to cave? Are we all going to become more conservative? Or are we...
I think two things. Number one, I wanted to go back to your politically active, like the millennials are more politically active, which I don't think that's a complete, like the 60s definitely.
Okay. So the job thing, yes, we were one of the earliest generations since like the silent generation and the greatest generation who literally had to, we all, a lot of us had to help with our families, not me. I was lucky enough that I didn't have to do that, but we were, I mean, there are statistics on this that I've read. That's what I'm referencing. They're old statistics, and I'm sure they're being blown out of the water by the Gen Zers because they are amazing kids. But I mean, yes, there was a lot of political activism at a young age by the boomers before they all sold out.
But I mean,
But not you guys.
well, no, there was like I'm gonna go down a train of thought here. Um, there's certainly political activism, and all of them. I would definitely see, but there's also, I guess, with the rise of mass media, every generation has a particular expression of sin of performative politics. The
Oh yes.
your boomers performative politics, their particular sin of that is, I guess, I'm not saying demonstrations and political protests are bad and they can't accomplish things. They certainly did with the civil rights movement, anti-Vietnam. But I definitely like that.
Also, side note, also doing it now. People are speaking out. The government is people in the government who are destroying programs and firing people and making disastrous decisions are reversing those decisions. So it had an effect then. It's having an effect now. Keep speaking out. Back to you.
Yeah. Yes. What I was gonna say is, after a while, it took on an air of fashionability. I think it, and I think also that, yes, the boomers did participate in it, but it was definitely, for the most part, the boomers were not the thought leaders of that political unrest of that time. It was definitely
it was the silent generation.
Yes,
And they just kind of followed along, like, well, this is good for what we should be doing now.
But and my generation's political performance sin basically came with the advent of television. We're definitely the ones that came up with the whole rock the boat movement. I think also things like neoliberalism came into that play at that point. But it's going to be something that'll be a reoccurring theme on this show. But it was basically, our performatives, like, get out on the vote and the vote will, just going out, and I guess going out and voting every 4 years, and then going back and, like, I did my bit, I got my sticker. I think that was our general sin of political performance. The way I see it, again, feel free to chime in after I said, is, I say the millennials' political performance sin came in during the advent of the internet,
social media,
and particularly social media.
Very much so.
And I hate to use this word because this term has been co-opted, and basically bent is virtue signaling. And the right, let us be assured here, the right virtue signals, the right virtue signals every time that goes it. Well, as a Christian and a conservative, I think
everybody who votes Republican virtue signals every time that they say anything about supporting the troops because they vote for people who then rip away financial support for those troops.
Yeah, the
votes are public, people. Listen to what people do, not what they say.
But to back to point, the millennials' virtue signaling sins come from both that with the advent of the internet and the commodification of political dissidents. What do I mean by that? Going and buying a Che Guevara T-shirt or a pink pussy hat, or having
a Black Lives Matter shirt that you bought from, like,
And again, no offense to this, like this right here is
Well, these guys are like an Appalachian podcast,
But I mean,
so they're a small business.
they're small business, but again, at the same time, we buy something that has our again, it's
Our ideals are bumper stickers.
and again with millennials especially, but again, it translates to every generation.
Yeah, we've kind of had an interesting diluting effect on other generations because of our adherence to like social media and that aspect of ourselves.
Well, because of commodification and social media, you've turned your politics into a soundbite, and you've turned your politics into a bumper sticker that it's an individual piece of flair that's surface level and doesn't really do anything to improve the world at large.
Yeah,
that is to me the millennials.
You're not making systemic political change by posting on Facebook.
My generation was its apathy and bare minimalism. The millennials was commodification.
We're kind of the opposite there.
Social media, like you guys, they're both bad.
We care too much, but not in the right ways.
Yeah, you got both refuse to get deeply involved as a group, but took different approaches to do so. Both inspired by what they perceived as the virtues of their generation.
Yeah. So you want to shit on boomers?
Yeah, I already did shit on boomers. So
I make a special point to shit on the boomers. So the boomers decided to follow a bunch of people in the 60s, to fight war and to open their minds and to have sex with fucking everyone, apparently. And then decided in the 80s that they were going to vote for a guy who committed genocide against people in this country. It was more of a neglectful genocide, a passive genocide than an active one, but he still did it. He was also a huge white supremacist and completely destroyed the country's resources, destroyed the country financially, and put in place things that would continue to destroy the country for decades to come. We're still living under the shadow of some of his administration. He also committed treason and never faced any time for it and made someone else go down for him. That's how much of a dick he is.
I like it when mommy goes down.
And she did.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
That's what she's known for.
Yeah, but...
Say no, Nancy.
Yeah. I can't.
Oh, they're in hell.
Yeah, they're both in hell. That being said, like...
I'm sorry, I should be laughing.
It's okay. It's okay. It's our podcast.
Yeah, suck it.
It's our podcast, and we'll do what we want to. Hey, t-shirt idea. That's the point. Like, yeah, as I said, like every of those three generations, they all have their performative politics crimes and sins that they should be held accountable, including mine. To sum up your, I tend to think mass media came to a prominence. You can argue with radio, but I would definitely say with television.
Video did kill the radio stars.
With television and also with I would say with the boomers, it was definitely turning political dissonance into fashion, which were later refined and improved by the subsequent 2 to 3 generations. I would say by the bare minimum and apathy of my generation with rock the boat and is the sin of mine. I definitely think the commodification and social media performative politics of the millennials is theirs. Gen Z has yet to be.
They're still pretty young, and I don't agree with putting a lot of they're 25 years old. Why haven't they done anything?
Just
give them time. It takes time to establish an identity as a generation, to be able to look back with hindsight and be like, yes, this was what it's like for us growing up. But, they don't give a shit about any of our baggage, our generation's baggage. They're just like, I'm going to do what I want. I see injustices in the world and I want to do something about them. And they don't wait for permission, and they will tell us off if we need to be told off. And you know what? I appreciate the hell out of that. I hope they keep that energy for the next several decades, because this country absolutely needs it.
I kind of wanted to get back earlier to a statement I made about generational tribalism was bullshit.
Mhm.
I was watching, again, I was watching an Adam Conover video where he was talking about how we did the generational tribalism came from not entirely, but one of the factors is that we don't associate everything in decades anymore. When I was growing up, we were living in the 80s, and the 70s had its own aesthetic, and so did the 60s. Everything going back to the 1920s. The 20s is where we started, like the Roaring 20s, the Depression in the 30s. The World War of the 40s, the Rockin' 50s, the psychedelic 60s, and so on and so forth. And then we got to kind of Y2K, and we tried to. We came up with
honestly, Y2K was so big that those of us who were like alive, who were aware of the magnitude of it, it's like, I don't think our brains ever fully recovered, because most of us are just like, 20 years ago it was the 80s. Like, no, it wasn't. Our internal clock stopped at the 2000s.
And I think there is, I guess, sort of an aesthetic. I guess in my head, I think auto-tune and boy bands as and
the popification of popular music, of all forms of all genres of music, country pop, rap pop, hip hop. What I don't know what that.
Everything was Coca-Cola-fied.
Yes.
But back to the point, what he was trying to get at is when we started naming, we stopped naming decades. We replaced that identification marker with generations, and which is kind of like, it's kind of messed up in a way that we, instead, like when we talk about the 80s, we're like, when it was going on, everybody was experiencing the 80s, and they're like, boomers were experiencing the 80s
very differently from each other.
But we were still part of it. But now,
but now there's like this group that was born in this year, like this decade belongs to them, not you. Like 1985, I was 3 years old. The 80s doesn't belong to me. I was too young to know what was going on.
It was
the 90s belongs to you. Take the 90s. What? You were alive. You didn't die in 1989.
Yeah. Like grunge music was a thing, and Gen Xers were prevalent listeners at that point. So we're like, again, it's like, when you look at it from that lens, the whole concept of I guess this generational tribalism, it seems ridiculous, because we all went through the 80s. We all went. I think it's like there's I'm thinking of a quote from a movie, Field of Dreams. I guess it's 80s, so it only belongs to us. But it's literally like they were at I guess like a town hall thing about a banned book, and one person, the mother and wife of the movie, goes and has an argument with like this crypto Nazi woman, and then like it's like you didn't experience. She says, you didn't experience the 60s and the evil moms. It's like, I experienced the 60s. I was like, I think you had two 50s and I stayed in the 70s. But again, it makes me think of that.
Yeah, it's like none of us owns a decade.
We all experienced
it differently. But if we were alive during it, we have the right to.
But depending on your age,
like we are a part of that.
I mean, it also goes to like when earlier, I think we were discussing like when people say, "Oh, when I was a child, it was great." It's like, yeah, because you were a kid.
Yeah, you didn't know what the hell was going on.
You had
to make mortgages.
you didn't have like monthly bills coming out. You were getting fed three squares. School was the worst thing. Like, of course it is. Like, well, we need to get back to that. It's like, yeah, when you had no responsibilities as an adult.
Just wait, you'll be super, super old and then at home, and you'll go back to that having no responsibilities.
But the point is that it's like, depending on what age you were, and on a myriad of different circumstances, your impression of a period of time is going to be vastly different from somebody else. Like,
even
like
but that doesn't mean that you don't, have the right to have fond memories of it.
Yeah. But the stuff,
as much as they were,
But I mean, another great crime of all of it is generational nostalgia. I feel
yes, all nostalgia is a lie.
I would love to do an entire episode,
especially.
I would love to do an entire episode of nostalgia down the line. I am somebody that is distinctly in. I do a lot of comic conventions and fan conventions to promote my stuff, and I see this firsthand. And
go to a toy convention where there are a lot of like hardcore collectors.
Yeah.
Oh my. Yes.
And again,
all nostalgia.
It's nostalgia in small doses is fine, but there is now
there are economies based on nostalgia.
Yeah, like. And to me, it's I think it has negative effects. I'm not saying it's all bad, but it certainly has its downsides.
It makes you remember things being better than what they were because of this thing.
Not just
it's also the quantification of it too.
It's not. Yeah, it's that, but I think it's also what. I guess it goes back to that whole when we haven't named anything. Like I say now, like if you see, like if I were to go for in like 1990, like dressed in whatever was the fashion of the time, and I went back. I guess like say with Marty McFly in Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Again, nostalgia.
Did you just get off the boat?
Yeah. Yeah, it literally goes back to 1955. He is, like they criticize it for his vest and fashion. Like, but if I were to go back in, like, I guess typical fashion of 2025 and go back to 2000, I don't think your average person dressed like that would stand out all that much. Like,
no, see, all we wear is like jeans and t-shirts, so we can go back to the 50s with that.
I think there's been...
It would not be looked on upon favorably, but it would not stand out as much.
I think to a certain degree there's, I guess, an aesthetic and creative stagnancy to a certain degree.
Yeah, it feels like that. The last 20 years or so, it's kind of fun.
I feel like we're just constantly revisiting other periods in time and other aesthetics of other cultures, rather than inventing something that's uniquely ours.
We've always done that because of the nostalgia factor about 20 years, and now we're going back to about where I came into early adulthood, but other generations seem to have been able to have done their own thing while acknowledging this nostalgia at the same time. And it just feels like it's kind of not like that anymore. Like, although I did hear that Delia's catalog is back, and that's disturbing.
What's that?
It's a catalog from like the late 90s and early 2000s. They sold all the skater pipes and the butterfly clips. Yes. I wanted lots of things in Delia's, but couldn't afford any of them. So I had to go to JCPenney and pretty much just wore jeans and t-shirts every day.
And then I say all this with the great assault that I am now of a culturally irrelevant generation. My generation...
Oh, me too. Oh, it's so much more relaxing. Yeah. We don't have to care about shit. No. I don't know who, like, a bunch of celebrities are, and it's awesome because people don't... I never cared about people judging me in the first place, but it's like people don't expect me to know who these people are. I didn't care then, but they were like, oh, what's the matter with you? And now they're just like, well, you're just old, so it doesn't matter. It's like, oh, it's awesome. Go away, pop culture.
Yeah.
I've hit 40. I got arm wiggle. Okay, so I have to be honest. I did no preparation for this episode whatsoever. I was trying to read. I couldn't find a lot of information under what I was trying to search for. So this morning I was trying to read a book about the theory behind actuarial tables. It was not informative or helpful, and I didn't get too far in it. So I came into this completely unprepared. Dan did all the research, and I was learning about the theory behind actuarial tables. And if those of you who don't know, actuaries are
it was better
death
off
accountants.
Yeah.
Death accountant. The worst metal band ever.
Death accountant.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to see them.
They're going to be in bed by 9, so they play early.
They're coming.
And at a respectable volume.
Coming soon to a public bathroom near you. Because that's all the places they're going to play.
Yeah.
But the acoustics are magnificent.
But yeah, I guess so. That I think the thing that annoys me the most is just people who are like, well, this was my generation, not yours. It's like, yeah, but we all experienced it. We were alive then, and if not, or the people who are like, my generation respected people. It's like, okay, first of all, my generation may be rude as hell, but we aren't the ones who are out here policing people's gender and their genitalia. That's some boomer shit. People were, what is it, nice but not kind back in the boomers' age, but we are kind but not nice. Yeah. We might spit in your face, but we'll help you clean it off afterwards.
I think, again, I guess going back to that earlier when people are going like, oh yeah, we were polite, we were civil. Yeah, to certain degrees, yes, but it was heavily influenced by fear, I guess.
Very much so. I mean, okay, Emmett Till got murdered in the 60s because a white woman who never faced any legal consequences, I will add, and her idiot husband and his brother, I believe, made up a lie that he came onto her in a public store. So they murdered him. And
his crime was
he didn't do anything. I don't think
his action was alleged whistling.
Yes, at a white woman.
My point is
he got lynched because they just didn't want him walking around, because he breathed the same air as them, and they never faced, at least the woman never faced any consequences for his murder being on her head because she perjured herself.
Again,
that's what you could do in the 60s. Queer people will start getting beaten to death until the 90s.
Matthew Shepard was 1996, if I'm either 96 or 98.
Yeah,
there are Gen Zers that are alive now that probably don't remember it, but when the Matthew Shepard incident went down. I guess the point I was getting to was, again, going back to the memes. My generation loves to embrace these type of memes, but so do the boomers. Like, back when and again, this goes back to the young like, back when I was around, we never got offended. And we not like they do now.
Oh, the boomers never got offended.
The boomers never got offended. Except that one time when black people sat down in a lunch counter.
Yeah, and tried to drink from the same water fountain as them.
And they got really super offended. And I've
murdered a bunch of them?
I've seen the footage. Or when a black woman goes and attends an all-white school. People tend to get really super offended.
Ruby Bridges is 65, by the way.
Yeah.
She had to be walked to school every day by her mother and security guards. Or they were, what are the guards that guard the president?
Secret Service?
Yeah, Secret Service guards. Because people didn't get offended then.
Yeah, but with boomers, it was, I guess, boomers and greatest generation, but boomers, they were coming of age at the end of segregation, but they still lived in their childhoods under segregation. And a lot of people, like earlier we were saying with her, a lot of those kids were boomers. Like most of those kids that were terrorizing this poor young lady were all boomers. So they were definitely a product of the institution of segregation.
Yes.
And that I think my generation, yes, there was racism too. There was stuff like that. The racism didn't go away by the signing of the 1964 and 65 Civil Rights Act. It didn't make racism go away. It just dog whistled it. But my not ever getting offended definitely drifted more towards queer folk. I can't necessarily say trans people. Trans people were out in the peripheries at that point. Like our there was so much in the periphery. All our terms for them are at that time are considered extremely offensive and extremely derogatory and well earned so. But getting back to the point, my generation is basically, I mean, it goes back to other generations too, but I think ours was basically, especially with men, with, I guess, males, cis males, being, anyway, our manhood being challenged.
Oh, yes.
At all. Our manhood, our maleness, at all being challenged, we would deeply get offended.
And that's really part of my generation too. As a child, we, have gotten better with that, but there was some rollover on that too. Yeah. We share the same sins in that regard.
And yes, sure, I knew what gay people were. I met gay people as early as the age of 6 or 7. So I would say that way I had a more quote unquote progressive view than a lot of people growing up at that time. But I definitely, to my shame, used the F term and other slurs when I was a child and going all the way, I would say even into my adolescence, thinking like, oh, but I don't mean it about, I guess like that South Park episode, like, well, if you use that word,
I don't mean it about those people. It's just a thing that you say.
Yeah, I don't mean it about actual queer people or actual gay people. I'm just using it to pick on that guy over there because he's a complete another, that word. Beep, sense or whatever. But it wasn't. You can't. It's kind of like.
And that has been something. Every successive generation has become less intolerably toxically masculine, I think. And boy, has that pissed off the boomers to no end. And you know what? I'm glad to see that this trend is continuing with the future generations because we need to get rid of toxic masculinity.
I'm happy, in the most part, that masculinity is being expanded and redefined.
The idea of toxic masculinity is trying to be, less. People are less. Children are less toxically masculine, and parents are not pushing it the way that they did. That I remember it happening as a child. It's becoming societally. Each successive generation of kids has become less reliant on the idea of toxic masculinity. Like my stepdad, Jim, is a good dude, but is very much has this idea of masculinity being sort of a, he's a big Clint Eastwood fan. This idea of fragile, toxic masculinity.
And then we're using that term, but I think there's like a need to detail certain symptoms. Like I would definitely emotional internalizing, basically not keeping it all in, not express like stoicism, I guess is the word that I'm looking for.
Repression.
Yeah, repression and stoicism. bucking it up, being mentally tough.
Fuck it up, kid.
Which
boys don't cry.
Was the sentence? It's like, you just keep it all into a little ball till it explodes. And it's like, and that's not healthy. It's not healthy.
No.
To
repression is bad.
It's not healthy to keep all your emotions and I'm not saying but I'm just using honesty all the time. That has its own problems.
But I'm just using it as an example of, yes, in my stepdad's generation, the way he approaches, toxic masculinity was a good thing. Mm-hmm. And, the views on negative aspects of masculinity have definitely changed significantly in his generation and my generation and future generations. It's definitely that hold that toxic masculinity has on our idea of what masculinity itself is, what healthy masculinity is, has definitely changed significantly. And there's been more conversations about, how do we continue this? How do we recognize healthy masculinity? Mm. How do we, separate out the toxic bits without, people losing their identity of who they are, in terms of gender. Being an agender person myself, none of this makes any difference to me or sense really, because gender seems pointless. But, I know people get pretty hung up on it for reasons that I don't understand. But, it's like these are conversations that we need to have to move ahead in society. And it's happening. It really is. Like, that's why I'm always very supportive of Gen Z kids, because they're like, they see this and they're evolving, and we're giving them the space to evolve.
I see it as this. I have a lot of hope in that arena with Gen Z, but I know right now with the current social and political atmosphere, there are some major stumbling blocks in the way.
But from a sociological, anthropological point of view, seeing this last ditch effort to hold on to this is encouraging, because it means that they're losing. By working so hard to preserve this thing that so many people don't want. It shows that we are evolving into a better society, away from the need to express ourselves in these terms. And this is just the last gasp of control that the people who exhibit these traits have on, are trying to exert on society as a whole. But the good news is, they always lose. The bad news is a lot of us lose with them. But we're going in a good direction.
I find like I said, I guess we're talking about the efforts now, the performative efforts now on those who are trying to maintain that old order gets more farcical.
Yes, they have. And that is a good sign.
More exaggerated, I guess, like things with, again, you're going back to toxic masculinity, like, I guess, the bro culture, I guess, to a certain degree, especially guys like your Andrew Tate.
Oh, Andrew Tate is hilariously toxically masculine.
Like, it's
Steven Crowder. Oh my God, those guys are hilariously ridiculous. They would
be dismissive enough of the fact that they do have these.
They do have pull. They have too much pull. Yeah. It's true. Yeah.
And I am scared for like your younger generations at that point who are looking up to them as paradigms of virtue.
Yeah.
That we're going to have some sort of regression that will result from it, but I'm hopeful the super culture overall is moving towards that direction. But and I don't think they're like certain things of masculine behavior or feminine behavior or those with outside of that binary are bad in and of themselves. Like
no, I'm focusing on like the toxic masculinity itself, not masculinity overall. Because there are good aspects to masculinity. It's a good thing being able to change a tire.
Yeah. Perseverance is
yes. Perseverance and determination. Leadership. All good things about masculinity.
There are great things about that.
Yeah.
But there are great things about femininity. And if somebody was born with the biological male sex junk wants to go out and Yeah, I'm gonna show my age here. It wants to adopt feminine traits or characteristics. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Nope. Be who you want to be and be happy.
First of all, be a decent human being.
Yes, that's a good way. Be a decent human being first of all, and then
everything else will follow. Now the rest of it is window dressing. Like it's sure it's part of your character, and if you get positive traits out of it, if you get positive lessons out of it, that you incorporate into your overall identity of being a decent person, great. I encourage you to do so.
Definitely. But anyway, so we're coming up. Well, it's after 5 now, so
yeah,
we're coming up on the hour and a half point. So, any last thoughts?
I'm hungry. My last thought for the show. We're both hungry.
So I wrote a stupid pun. I'm going to share it because nobody paid attention to it on Facebook. So.
Yeah. What's wrong with you people?
Right? I'm hilarious.
Who is this one viewer? Is it us? Are we viewing ourselves?
Is that Kevin? It is Kevin. Hi, Kevin.
It's Kevin.
Thank you for not giving up on us yet. Yeah. All right. So I wrote a stupid pun. I'm going to finish the show with that. I can find it here. A man emigrating to the U.S. lost his legs and decided to use ornate stucco columns as prosthetics. When immigration asked him what ethnicity he was, he replied, Italianate American. All right. We'll see you guys next week.